Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. We've been coming up just a little late, been having some late nights with this Democratic National Convention here in Chicago. I'm Santita Jackson. It's a joy to be with you today. Please reach out to me on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. That's where the morning stars are. Ashley from Memphis and Robert. And oh my goodness, so many of you are just coming up. Everybody, like and share, like and share, like and share, like and share. And of course, we're on the Santita Jackson and Friends, Santita Jackson and Friends on Facebook. And I'm on Twitter. Well, X. That's right, at Santita J. At Santita J is my handle. So everybody join in the conversation. Join in, jump in. Hey, Bernadette, jump in on this conversation these about the speeches last night. The Obamas came in, and they were in top form. Were they not fantastic? Want to know what your thoughts are about the speeches about Bernie Sanders, who was calling out the oligarchs. What did you think of that? Um, mm, and Democrats have complained a bit that he's not been on message. He's not been on message, which is interesting. I hope that we will get to a place where we can disagree without being disagreeable, because a lot of people have a lot of different opinions. You can't just have one. We don't all have the same point of view, so we don't all have the same opinion, but we can be under the same tent, right? And so there's that. So everybody, let's get right to it. Let's talk about these speeches. Let's talk about what they mean. Everybody, please like the show. Thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. That's going to help us with our algorithms. You all have been really helping us a lot. So Bernadette and Robert and Ashley and everybody within the sound of my voice, please like the show. Like the show. Give us a comment. You're going to help us a lot. Help us to continue to grow the show. So like and share, like and share. If you are on YouTube, like and subscribe. But wherever you are, please like the show and send it along. I have got Dr. David Gibbs from the University of Arizona. You got to get his book, The Revolt of the Rich. It explains so much of why, so many of the reasons, the multiplicity of reasons why the society is where it is. And of course, attorney Robert Patillo. Robert Patillo, trying to
Good
get.
morning.
Okay, we're getting some feedback from you, Robert. And of course, we are. There you go. We try. Uh-oh, we're still getting it. Okay. All right. There we go. And of course, he's had late nights like me too. Robert, you look like me. Oh my gosh. Because then you
Yeah,
got to watch the replay too. It's like, oh,
I have that fun Fox News 2:20 a.m. hit and then the 3:50 a.m. hit last night. So, yeah,
oh,
the Democratic convention ending every night at midnight was not in my bingo cards.
oh my gosh. Oh, and you will have those hits, and they are on time with them at Fox. Thank you very much. Yeah, I've done that. So God bless you. You got to send us some clips so that we can see what you were talking about. But stay right there, Attorney Robert Patillo, because I would like to get your assessments of what we heard from the Obamas last night. Of course, they were magnetic. They were really on fire, and you saw. Uh, the former first lady, or the forever first lady, Michelle Obama, take a departure from what she said some years ago. When they go low, we go high. And they still think that she went high, but she was far more confrontational. What did you think about that? And far more confrontational on the issue of racism. But but we still didn't hear about DEI, which is being eliminated, right? And we have seen the Supreme Court gut affirmative action in higher education. And so, I'm not asking you to do everything, but it's rhetorically it was very strong. But the reality is we're dealing with some real issues down on the ground, uh, that it's impacting our educational access, the jobs that we have and hope to hold, and on and on. Think about that. Well, Robert Patillo, you tell me. What did you think?
And, I think this was very much the most unchained version of Michelle Obama that we've seen since 2008. I remember first meeting Michelle and Barack Obama at the Rainbow Push National Convention back in 2004. Back before the DNC speech. Barack still smoked cigarettes at the time, and hearing them speak and talk, this is the closest I've heard her to that in nearly 20 years. Because unburdened by the weight of the office of First Lady, unburdened by the judgments and consternation that comes from being the first African American in this position, it seemed that Michelle was very close to being able to finally speak her mind. And I want people to go back and listen to both Obama's speeches back to back. They were two halves of the same speech. Michelle Obama was giving the emotional half. She was talking about kind of the ethos of the nation, what it means to have these fascist forces on the other side attacking us. Even when she mentioned that some of us don't have the affirmative action of being able to go to our daddy and fail and fail and fail upwards again and again. And she talked about the fact that so many of us have been judged harshly and not having a second and third chance to succeed. So now to hear these people talk about DEI and meritocracy, etc., strikes us all in a very strong way, because they're essentially saying that all of your work, all of your hard work, all of your qualification, none of it works. Your DEI, you did not earn it. Then the Barack half of the speech was the policy half of the speech, where he really touched on the achievements of the Biden administration, but also touched on many of the policy issues the Democrats have to do going forward. This is actually the strength that Kamala Harris has that former President Trump does not, which is that she is on a team that you're able to night after night after night crank out hit after hit after hit with keynote after keynote after keynote. There's a reason the Republicans had, Amber Rose and Hulk Hogan, Dana White, Kid Rock, etc., because you don't have the Romneys speaking at their convention. You don't have the McCain family speaking at the Republican convention. You don't have the Bush family, which was the heart of the Republican Party for the better part of a century. They don't speak at the Republican convention anymore. There are no Reagans on that ballot. The Trump movement has turned the Republican Party into Trump or nothing. And because of that, many of the leading voices of the party are not able to actually be effective surrogates for him. And what we've seen this week and in the past 3 weeks or so is that the menace of the years finds and shall find all of us. And Donald Trump is slowing down. He doesn't have the same energy that he had at one point in time. You're seeing more J.D. Vance on the campaign trail doing sit-down interviews, etc., just so Trump has time to recuperate. He's almost 80. It's happens, it's life. But when you don't have that team around you that the Democrats have, and also demonstrating the bench the Democrats have, they essentially are displaying to the nation that they can reach back 50 years into the past and pull out Maxine Waters and Joe Biden and Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, these figures from the baby boom generation, from the greatest generation, etc. But they can also reach 20 years into the future and bring out a Jasmine Crockett, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Jonathan Jackson, these voices that are really going to be leading the party going forward. And also that they can be a rural party and a suburban party and an urban party all at the same time. I think that's what we got on display last night with Michelle and Barack Obama, a demonstration of just how big this movement can be once united.
Mm. Dr. David Gibbs, your thoughts about what we saw last evening?
I have to be honest and say I did not have a chance to actually watch the speeches, and I've just read about them this morning.
Mhm.
What you were seeing is definitely a high level of energy, and at least the appearance of unity in the party. I think that there are significant problems, most notably with Gaza. I was very struck by at least what I read about Bernie Sanders' speech, that it was a rousing endorsement of the Harris-Walz ticket. Um, but at the same time, he very strongly spoke out about Gaza, the terrible massacre that the Israel Defense Forces are undertaking in Gaza. And this really is very much a dilemma, not just for the Democratic Party, but for people like Bernie Sanders, in the sense that he has always presented himself, I think, somewhat plausibly as a man of principle, somewhat different from the rest of the Democratic team, shall we say. And he's not really a Democrat. He's never been a member of the Democratic Party. He's always been sort of an independent voice, literally independent. He runs as an independent in Vermont. And, he's speaking out against what the IDF is doing in Gaza. But at the same time, the dilemma he faces is that the U.S. is backing it to the hilt. The IDF could not be doing what it's doing in Gaza without complete and total U.S. support, including massive financial support. And this has been the policy of you know Biden and Harris. And there's very little in the record to suggest Harris is really going to change anything substantively. Um, and that's being papered over here. And I understand the logic of doing that, which is that Gaza is one issue, but there are other issues as well, and you make compromises in politics. And a lot of people are saying that despite my strong feelings about Gaza, I want to back the Democratic ticket anyway, because you have to make moral compromises, and I do understand that. But at the same time, one does have to realize the price one pays for making those compromises. Which in this case does mean that you're supporting a party that is deeply complicit um, in killing large numbers of civilians, large numbers of children. Whether this is personally, I don't, being an independent myself, somebody who's not going to be voting for the Democratic ticket, I'll be voting for Cornel West. I'll just get that on the table here.
Mhm.
I personally don't think it's a worthwhile trade off myself, but I think if one wishes to go there, if one wishes to basically just wholeheartedly endorse the party and sort of ignore the fact that this is a party that has enabled what is going on in Gaza to happen, you have to be honest with yourself about what you're doing and the fact that you are basically making this compromise. And you can't pretend that Harris is going to be dramatically different from Biden, because there's nothing in the record to suggest she will be different from Biden on the specific issue of Gaza. So I think that's going to be a thorn in the side of the party throughout the election, and it's going to be a source of great discomfort for a lot of people, including a lot of people who will end up voting for Harris despite their reservations.
Well, I mean, Attorney Patillo, why don't you speak to that? Because we have had protests in Chicago. Attorney Patillo and Dr. David Gibbs. Of course, his book is The Revolt of the Rich, The Revolt of the Rich. You need to get it. Go to Amazon and get it. You will really enjoy it. And you'll be educated too. Um, because the corporate media, you would think that no one is in the streets. You
Oh,
know.
well,
Yes, please.
I was going to say, I think that what we're seeing is the fact that it is penetrating and moving its way inside. During President Biden's remarks, he called for a ceasefire. During Bernie Sanders' remarks, they called for a ceasefire. I've counted at least a half dozen other speakers that have called for a ceasefire now. I think this had to also be contextualized in the prism of the report that came out this week. After the last election, back in 2020, I think myself and Dwight McKee said that President Trump will be running a Vichy government out of Mar-a-Lago. And we're now getting reports from CBS and other news outlets that he's doing exactly that, and that he's been in conversations with Netanyahu to prevent him from entering into a ceasefire, making the argument that if he has a ceasefire, then he will be helping Biden and by extension Harris be reelected, and that will hurt Israel in the long term. It's now become clear through these reports that the IDF is working directly with President Trump and is effectively a wing of the MAGA movement. We saw when Netanyahu came to the United States, he met with MAGA leaders. He met with Mike Johnson. He essentially told the protesters they don't have the same rights as their American citizens. If we look at the Trump Plan 47 or Agenda 47, so not Project 2025, which Republicans claim they don't believe anymore, they've disavowed. Agenda 47, the Trump plan, I think is point 18, says that he will deport anybody who is pro-Hamas or pro-Palestinian from the United States of America. That is Stalin-esque. When we're talking about these things, you have other Republican officials who have talked about using a nuclear weapon against the Palestinians. We have Jared Kushner, who has said that the Gaza Strip will be some of the most valuable oceanfront property in the Middle East if they are able to clear the Palestinians off. My point is that there's a qualitative difference between Democrats who have been trying to compel the Palestinians into a ceasefire, or no, the Israelis into a ceasefire, while also supporting humanitarian aid for the Palestinian people, while also calling for a two-state solution, while also encouraging Netanyahu not to make incursions into Rafah to avoid civilian casualties, while bringing resolution before the United Nations calling on a ceasefire. There's a qualitative difference between that and the Republican Party, which says that they will deport anybody from the country who's pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas, and also will carry out, according to Trump, at 12 noon on Inauguration Day, the largest mass deportation of over 10 million people from the country in American history. I understand that there are policy differences and that there were concerns, but if your interest is the benefit and the sustenance of the Palestinian people and a potential peaceful settlement to this, there's a big difference between having Kamala Harris in office and having someone like a Donald Trump in office. So when we talk about this idea of compromise, it's not saying we're compromising our principles and values, but in a two-party system, in a pluralistic democracy, we shoot ourselves in the foot in many ways by having this conceptualization of intellectual purity, which may end up putting people in office will be far more deleterious to the interests of that region.
Well, I mean, why don't you respond to that, Dr. Gibbs? I mean, because is this intellectual purity or is it principle? Because I'm wondering, as we look at all of the people, Attorney Patillo and Dr. David Gibbs, as we look at all of the people who are advising the top tier Republicans and Democrats, they're the same people. They just come from different sides of the aisle of BlackRock, for example. No one talks enough about BlackRock and their negative impact upon our lives. No one talks about Palantir. you know, Peter Thiel is, he calls himself a libertarian. He's actually a little bit more fascist than libertarian. and, and these people are all over it. They have their people placed. It's very interesting. The same corporate entities have people in the Republican and Democratic Party, people who are on the right and the left, and, because it's like nothing changes. I think that, Ariel Gold of the Fellowship for Reconciliation had it right when she said, look, she sounded like my mom. My mother said I would never marry someone I couldn't fight. She said, and I'm going to vote for someone I can fight. At least I can fight Kamala Harris. And, and if I have an opportunity to get a meeting with her, even though I think you can get a meeting with Trump too, because they, at least at this time, if this Robert better than anyone. Mm-hmm. When you reach out to them, they reach right back. They want to know, what do you want? Can I come on your platform, whatever it is? But Dr. Gibbs, I mean, what do we do about Gaza? I mean, because as you can see, the corporate media, you would think that no one is in the streets here. They're here by the thousands. Attorney Patillo, Dr. Gibbs. Not talking about it at all. We're just talking about the speeches, and that's what they're talking about on all of the networks, and that's it. We're getting ready for the TV show tonight. But the real anguish and anger in the streets, no one's really discussing. Dr. Gibbs?
I think there are 2 points there I'll address. One is what you mentioned about the corporate funders of the parties, and I think you're quite right that what one really has to do is look not so much at the speeches given at either the Democratic or the Republican conventions, which are increasingly populist. The Republicans, of course, started the populist style, and the Democrats are trying to play catch up. But I think in both cases, what you really have to do is look who's funding them. And if you look at who's funding them, you can see the populism is mostly just for show. I certainly agree with that. On the issue of Gaza, I think you're seeing a very strong rhetorical difference between the parties. And the Republicans do sound much more belligerent on the issue of Gaza, much more forcefully pro-Netanyahu, whereas the Democrats seem much more mild. They're talking about a ceasefire and that kind of thing. The key question really for the Democrats is, will they be willing to cut off U.S. aid to Israel if Israel does not comply with American demands for a ceasefire? And I suspect the answer is unequivocally no. And if the U.S. is not willing to do that, is not willing to cut off aid to Israel if Israel does not comply with U.S. demands for a ceasefire, then the talk doesn't really mean that much. My sense is there's no real difference between the two parties in Gaza except for rhetoric. Rhetorically, there's a big difference. If you look carefully, What Israel has been saying is they might consider a temporary ceasefire where the Hamas agrees to release the remaining Israeli hostages, those that are still alive, but only a temporary ceasefire, and that after the hostages are released, they'd go back to exactly what they're doing now. Hamas would never accept that, of course, and so a temporary ceasefire clearly is not a real solution. But that's the only kind of ceasefire Israel has indicated it's open to. And if that's the case, the only option the U.S. has is cutting off aid to Israel. Again, if U.S. were to cut off aid to Israel, yes, then the U.S. would have real leverage over Netanyahu. But the U.S. simply will not do that. I can't see any scenario where Harris or Biden, or Trump for that matter, would cut off aid to Israel in the foreseeable future. There's just nothing in the record to suggest that that's a possibility here. And if Harris is not willing to do that, then really her position at the end of the day isn't that much different from Trump's on the issue of Gaza.
But well, can can how important is it? How important is it for the United States to redefine its relationship with Israel? Uh, Attorney Robert Patillo, Dr. David Gibbs, starting with you, Attorney Patillo, because I heard, a very fine reporter, Whitney Webb. I know you've heard of her, both of you, I'm sure. And she's so independent, she's moved to Argentina, like Glenn Greenwald. And so many, it's sad that so many of America's most principled and diligent reporters are leaving the United States. They're like, I don't have the freedom here, and it's amazing. And she called. She said, we really are a binational state. So even if we want to move or redefine our relationship with Israel, we share so many military secrets now that we can't move. Robert?
I think that's correct. That we have been intertwining ourselves with Israel since the fall of the Ottoman Empire. Essentially, that America is part of the negotiation and bargain for us to enter World War II. Was that we got to take over portions of the British Empire and the British protectorates throughout the world. Part of that being the oversight of the Israeli state. The American military and the Israeli military are effectively one military. There are only two countries that have iron domes: the U.S. and Israel. Despite now other countries catching up on that. When you talk about the F-35 program, there's only one other country that has their own variant. I think I mentioned before, we have a Air Force F-35, a Navy F-35, a Marine F-35, and an Israeli F-35. When you're talking about the intelligence apparatus, as it would be, the only way that Israel is able to carry out their string of assassinations they've gone on this summer, seemingly without any international condemnation around it. They assassinated Houthis in Yemen. They assassinated Syrians. They assassinated officials in Hezbollah officials in Lebanon. They carried out the assassination on Iranian soil in the guest house of the at the capital of Tehran, an assassination against a Hamas leader. So Israel cannot do those things without the U.S. satellite network, the U.S. intelligence programs, and indeed the American footprint in the Middle East is based upon the idea of having Israel as a base of operations, just as we saw during Desert Storm, that we cannot carry out those sorts of deep interdictions into the region without being able to have a toehold both in Israel and in Kuwait with our alliances there. So the idea of simply cutting off Israel is a lot easier than the actuality of attempting to cut off Israel. And we've seen in the last year of this conflict that President Biden has been deemed all but impotent in all his calls for Netanyahu. We remember directly after the October 7th attack, President Biden flew to Jerusalem, stood next to Netanyahu and advised him on having caution and not to follow the U.S. path in the Middle East after a terrorist attack and launch a genocide. Netanyahu did not pay a bit of attention to him. He told Netanyahu not to launch the ground offensive into Rafah. Netanyahu paid no attention. So I think that America has to reevaluate our relationship with Israel. But judging by the fact that people such as Cori Bush and Jamal Bowman seem to have been taken out because of their support for the Palestinian people, we have many politicians, not just on the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, but writ large in America, that feel that any time that you stand up against the American interest in that region, that you will lose politically. So it's a point in time where we have to have a bipartisan conversation on exactly who runs things, who's the big brother and little brother in this relationship, because it very much seems that the American taxpayer simply funnels money into Israel, and they get to do what they want to do it, when they want to do it, how they want to do it, and there's no one, including the President of the United States, that can exercise oversight over them.
Well, I mean, Dr. Gibbs, I know you got to run. Of course, you know you're more than welcome to stay as long as you wish. His book, The Revolt of the Rich, is out on Amazon right now. Your thoughts? I mean, are there any red lines? Do you think that with the speeches that we're hearing, people complained about Monday night, they made significant tweaks, and last night was just full of energy, and it ran long, but you got a smattering of who's under this big tent of the Democratic Party. But there's still pushback internally against Senator Sanders, Attorney Patillo. Reverend Jackson wanted Senator Sanders to walk him out onto the stage, or certainly to walk with him, and the Democrats absolutely balked. They said no, he's not on message. What can you say, Dr. Gibbs?
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be a something the Democrats will not be able to resolve is the fact that basically they are, deeply intertwined with the what Israel is doing in Gaza, and they can't simply walk away from that with rhetoric, which is what they're doing. They have to own up to the fact that they're making it possible. I saw one of the people in the comments, I think his name was Williams, commented that rather than spending American money to support the killings in Gaza, perhaps we should be spending it to redevelop the south side of Chicago. Indeed, that's a real issue here. I mean, it's not obviously the first and foremost issue are the terrible things that are being done in Gaza right now by the IDF. But there are other costs as well, including the fact that we could do something else with the tens of billions of dollars we've spent enabling the IDF to do what it's doing,
Mm.
things that could actually improve people's lives. First and foremost, in this country, beginning with this country, helping our own citizens have better lives. And also, one could spend it overseas, things like disease eradication, improving vaccination in places like sub-Saharan Africa. There are all sorts of things the U.S. could be doing that are actually not that expensive, far cheaper than war, that are not being done because the budgets aren't there. And one of the reasons we don't have the money is it's being diverted into war, including the war in Gaza. And so, the trade-off is very clear, including the trade-off for the American public, that it's American tax dollars that are enabling what Israel is doing in Gaza to take place. And, it's a reasonable question to ask. Are we spending too much money on war and too little helping our own citizens lead better lives? I wish there were more discussion of that at the Democratic Convention. But there's such an effort basically right now to just present this facade of unity and to paper over all the other issues. That's clearly not going to happen. I do have to run, however. Thank you for having me on. It's been a pleasure being on with you as well, Mr. Patillo.
Thank you.
And thanks again for mentioning my book, Santita. Have a good day.
The Revolt of the Rich, everybody. The Revolt of the Rich. We, Attorney Robert Patillo, are being joined. We have been joined by Attorney Anastasia Sinat, of course, your sister. Ancestrally, you all at least share Haiti. That's where you all stopped on the way to the United States. We all came from Africa and stopped somewhere. Oh, heaven help us. And of course, we've got Dr. LaShawn Latrice. She is a community psychologist, and she has an organization, Make Noise for Change. But I think community psychology, the whole concept, I didn't know that there was a concept that is so fascinating, because to step back and study communities and then to see how you treat people in them is something quite laudable. But so what did you see the speeches last night and the night before, particularly
I
last night?
certainly did.
So tell
I
me, what do you think?
So first of all, the energy that I felt running through my veins when the former First Lady Michelle Obama hit the stage was probably what all women. And then to see her hair was in braids. As a Black woman, former First Lady, I mean, the only thing I could think to myself was, oh my goodness, represent, represent, represent. All the little girls that were looking at her, and that outfit was just gorgeous. I don't know if you
Mhm.
can tell her, but please tell her she just looked fabulous yesterday. Now let's go into the words. You know, she had been quoted many years ago of saying, when they go low, we go high. I don't know. She cut him up so low yesterday. I just thought, wow, she was really skillful when she came from left to right and back to left again, back to right. It just felt so wonderful to hear her break it down factually. And then, of course, you know, and I think she's probably going to get a lot of memes for this one. But when she said, does he even know that he's seeking a Black job? Right.
Mhm.
So I thought that she really energized the crowd. Um, and I think former President Barack Obama was correct when he said, "Now, how can you follow that?" So her energy was just amazing. But I think some of the speeches were supposed to be around certain themes, and
Mhm.
so I did get that theme. So, like the first night, I believe the theme was related to just for the future, moving forward.
Mhm.
And then last night's theme was just about vision in general, right? How we can visualize, right, moving forward. And I think tomorrow and Thursday, there's also themes. But I think that she really hit it on the head because the energy that we felt with her, we didn't get with even the current first lady, Jill Biden, Dr. Jill Biden. We didn't get it with Secretary Hillary Clinton. And, although our soror, Jasmine Crockett, always brings the house down,
Mhm.
because her iterations are just wonderful. Right? I'm sure that last V iteration is going to be on a t-shirt somewhere.
She said, I guess
You're
she said, I
right.
guess alliteration is back.
I mean, I just thought it was
Mhm.
great. I really think I don't know who put it together, but the Democratic committee really put it together this time. They really brought the messages this time. They really made sure that this convention was so much more powerful, organized, and message driven, if that makes sense. Right. And
Okay.
I thought that it was just just excellent experience last night.
Well, I mean, Dr. LaShawn Latrice, what say you? And it's interesting hearing everyone's take, Attorney Patillo, because
Hmm.
everybody got something different that they said, something different that they were looking for, which is very interesting because even your presentation, um, Attorney Sanat, there's a calculation in that. Um, I remember Newsweek did an article, probably their first major article on the former First Lady when they were running for president in 2008. And it really struck me that they said, first of all, Michelle is brown. I mean, really brown.
Hmm.
She looks like a Black woman. And I said, that's nice symbolically. I mean, that's good. I mean, because, really, how could I say this? The only way I can say it is to say it, because that Reverend Jackson and Mrs. Jackson were the model for that, because he has a certain look and she does too. And I kept hearing in 84 and 88 that what my mother looked like mattered a lot to people
Yep.
because she was
Hmm.
not a light skinned or a brown skinned woman with curly hair and all of that. She, looked like she was, heavily West African, right? And so, that's interesting. But, I mean, and so, so I want you to know, I process all of that because I thought it was interesting that that was in the first paragraph of the article on this profile they did of Michelle. It was entitled, everybody,
Mhm.
"The Meaning of Michelle."
Mm.
I just don't want that meaning to be misused and for us to be abused by it, because we still have had DEI, which is being eliminated. Uh,
Mhm.
the Supreme Court just gutted affirmative action in higher education. And we're
Mm.
watching our HBCUs. The states are taking out their presidents and they're wiping out their boards and they're replacing them. And I promise you, these HBCUs, which are now being funded, are going to become predominantly white institutions in short order. Attorney Robert Patillo, you and I both
Hmm.
went. And you're seeing it happen. And so while we're having this moment, I hope that we are mindful of that. I'm going to return to you on that point in a minute, Attorney Robert Patillo. But I have to tell you, as a point of personal privilege, I've known her a long time. And so seeing her last night almost brought tears to my eyes, because I thought I know that she entered into this not wanting to be in politics. I
Right.
mean, at all. And to have watched her growth and to see her find herself, and you keep on living, you find different parts of yourself. And I see that, and it touched me profoundly. It really, really did. Even as I look at all of these other elements, I looked at that first, and I was
Mhm.
so proud of her. And she was unleashed, but now I need another unleashing to take place, because she looks great, she did well, and she gave voice to a lot of our concerns. But we got some real problems here. And so I need someone to talk about somebody nobody's mentioned. She did drop something on affirmative action. Y'all got to deal with the fact that affirmative action has been wiped out in higher education. That's a problem. DEI is being wiped out. That's a problem. Even then, we have forgotten that the NAACP called on young black athletes not to go to school in Florida.
Hmm.
And so
Just
but
her presence alone, though. Can you imagine how many little brown women are looking up at her, seeing? I mean, I see myself in her. I'm a brown skinned woman,
Mhm.
and I also wear braids. And had it not been for our soror, Kara Mosley Braun, wearing braids, I would have never had the courage to put
Mhm.
it in my hair and wear it for so long. I would have never thought it was in a professional look, because I do remember when she went to the Senate floor as the first African American female senator
Mhm.
in United States history to wear braids, people lost their mind.
Well, you know what? I think because of our attachment to hair, you know what my mother did with my sister and I as young kids? When I was 6, my mother cut all my hair off.
Oh,
And she did the same thing with my sister at 8. So we had little afros, more or less. And I said, hmm. She said, and she said years later when I became an adult, Dr. Latrice, and perhaps you can explain, you can take, but I came of age in the 70s. My sister came of age in the 80s. My mother said, I did that because you didn't know this at the time, but Black people had a real attachment to color and to hair. And I wanted to disabuse you of the notion that you needed hair to be beautiful.
oh,
And
wow.
even though, okay, your afro didn't look the way you wanted it to look, but I wanted to take that from you, and I wanted you to focus on something else. And so I'm appreciative. I'm appreciative of everything that she was giving. She was throwing something to our young girls. Um, that having been said, we need that, and we need some more, because with our colleges, with our admission to college being threatened, with DEI getting jobs, that's being threatened, with the fact that Black people will have negative wealth. It has been projected by the Institute for Policy Studies. We will have negative wealth by 2085. The same study said it will take 500 years more for Black people to have economic equality in the United States. I need somebody to talk to that, because that's a problem. But stay right there, Attorney Sanat, because I'm feeling you. I want to continue for us to put these other issues out, Attorney Patillo and Attorney Sanat and Dr. Latrice, because I don't want us to lose sight of those things too while we're having this moment. I mean, because the moment has to be balanced by the real pain that we're in. Dr. LaShawn Latrice, what did you see?
Good morning. Good morning. I am enjoying this conversation. Um, so I saw a lot yesterday. I saw what
Mhm.
was happening inside and outside the convention. I had the privilege of driving through much of the area yesterday. And it seems that there are two different worlds happening right now. I see what's happening inside of the Democratic National Convention. And I've had an opportunity to come and attend some of um, the sessions. However, I am glad that they have incorporated the spirit of unity that seems to resonate there. But I do think it is a bit out of touch from reality. And when I say that, what I mean is the voices of the people are not necessarily being amplified. It is too much going on in the streets to have such a unified message that excludes the everyday person. So, as a community psychologist, as a Black woman, as someone who has continuously fought and pressed so that our children don't have to go through much of what we are seeing take place now, it is my hope and my prayer that people come to the realization that if we do not give some sort of resistance about these messages that are being silenced, we're going down the wrong path. So I could not attend the DNC with a clear conscience and look around and see that there are no people in there who come from the communities that are such impacted by everything that's happening, from the lack of accountability amongst the law enforcement, the migrant crisis, just the poverty, and the notion that we are having a DNC come to Chicago and everything pauses and stops and we change the face of certain things so that we can impress those. I saw people cleaning up the expressways. The expressways have not looked a certain way in years.
Oh my
And
goodness, you're so right.
person. It is awful. My husband and I drive up and down the expressways, and we often compare it to what happened under this administration and this administration. But I see an intentional effort to try to beautify because of what's happening now in the city of Chicago. But what about those voices who are silenced? What about those people who don't even understand what the DNC represents and what democracy is supposed to look like versus what it looks like now? It's not about partying. It's not about going to high profile parties and watching people float by on boats with militarized weapons. That's unreal. This is a huge disservice to humanity. And just as an individual who wants to see change and I want to see things happen, I do not feel like we can overlook the thousands of people, the people that are standing outside, whatever is happening, getting hit by billy clubs. All of that is absurd.
But Dr. LaShawn Latrice, can I push back just a little bit?
Sure.
Sometimes when you're trying to put out a vision of a better place, you've got to make sure that the effort is seen. And if you're constantly showing negative, 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 how are people going to get from the negative part of their internal soul into the positive if they can't see it on TV? I
You
mean,
know,
all the
let,
beauty that we see is not something we've been seeing on TV. What
but
we've been seeing is these little
mhm.
protesters that are probably paid by
No,
the
no, 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 no,
opposition.
stop, no, 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 stop,
I do
stop,
think so because I don't
no, no,
understand why you want to mess
no,
up
no.
what's
Wait a
going
minute.
on at the DNC, but you did
You,
nothing at the RNC.
no, no,
What
no. They
what's
did. They no. They were protesting at the
Yes,
RNC.
they
But my
were.
point is that they're not showing that. But
They're
stop it
not
now.
showing it.
You have relatives in Haiti, and they are living under the most horrific circumstances. Rashida Tlaib, the congresswoman from Detroit, her grandmother lives in the West Bank. Anastasi, her grandmother. These are folks who have lost. Who can tell you? I've lost all my cousins. I've lost my grandparents. I've lost my parents. I've lost
but
a
isn't
hundred.
that why Sean King got banned
No,
from Instagram?
yeah,
It's
but
because
I'm
he
just
kept showing way too much
no.
graphic
He wasn't
detail.
showing way too
Sometimes you
much.
just have to limit
No,
what you show.
no, no. I know. I don't agree with censorship. You need to show what bombing does to people. They are lifting up people's
Oh,
heads, body,
absolutely.
face. No, no, no. I disagree with that.
Absolutely.
Do you want people to limit what we see in Haiti? Do you?
Look, the images that they show in Haiti, I disagree with as well, because I do realize that being from parents that have been there, grandparents, so on and so forth, I stand on their shoulders, and I've obviously seen a gorgeous side of Haiti. But the truth is the truth. You can only see so much before you begin to
No,
believe the
and you
lie.
say that, and
As
with all due
Dr.
respect,
What was it,
you say
David Gibbs,
that,
that was just
but
here
no,
talking about international policy
with
and how
all
we
due
impact the
respect,
world.
you see that from a place of comfort. When you are coming from a place, my parents have a different view of the world because they grew up in apartheid America, which made it possible for your parents to immigrate here. Unless they had marched and fought and bled and died, you all wouldn't have been able to get here. The fact
I
is
agree, but
that
there's
no,
still
no, no.
challenges for African
Jesus.
and
Let me say this: Jesus came to comfort the disturbed and to disturb the comfortable, and that's what I come from. I am not for, I don't want you to hide what dropping a bomb looks like. People need to see it because maybe if they see it, they'll stop dropping bombs. How about that?
but the truth
Jesus,
is,
and let me
look at
tell you
all the
something.
images that
They have
represent
said no, no, no,
Africa, the
because when you
continent of
no,
Africa. People still
and they're
think that
wrong for
people
that.
in the
No, no,
in the
and
entire
people
continent of Africa are in
and
huts.
you know what? No, no, and no, but some people do live in huts, and there's nothing wrong with the indigenous people living the way that they live. They
But
live
that's
in
not all of the country,
no,
or
no,
that's
no.
not all
But
the
what I'm saying
continents.
is, but no, what I'm saying is, if that is how they live, there's nothing wrong with that. We can't come from a place of judgment about how people live as if they live as their ancestors have lived. Everybody does not need to embrace a Western model. My point with you is simply oops this.
Uh-oh.
Uh, because when you talk about being paid actors, you that's offensive to me because I come from the activist tradition, and I know the paid actors who would break up our marches were paid by the government. The only
Absolutely.
the only the only march that Dr. King had that devolved into violence, a black man from Morehouse College who was affiliated, who was paid by the CIA, he did it. These are not paid actors. They're not.
Not at
These
all.
are people who have
I mean,
families
that's the
and came
argument that the
and
community is raising because we can't understand the lack of
I can.
civilization, lack of civilized
Well,
behavior.
I'm out there.
You're
I'm
on
out there,
TV
What
attorney.
for
do you
I'm out
mean?
violence.
there.
You're not on
What are
TV
you
for your
talking
message.
about?
I'm out there,
They,
attorney. I'm out there. I'm on the streets. I'm out there. I've been in the game for over a decade. And I can tell you, we can identify an agitator a mile away. We know who they
Mhm.
are. We know what they look like. We know where they come from. And the actions that we are seeing happen now, they don't actually emulate that. First of all, those people come to destroy an entire message. We already
Okay.
know that the state of Illinois, the city of Chicago has worked very hard to try to divide these protests up. And no matter what, the protests are still going to happen. But at the same time, if someone identifies people who come to agitate, if they can neutralize that, it gets neutralized because they want their message to be unified. But I still think not showing it does not make it go away. I drove my daughter to college yesterday. I drove back all the local roads from the north side of Chicago all the way to the south suburbs. I passed crime scenes where I passed bodies on the ground. I witnessed red tape. It was just insane. And then if we just continue to just take our eyes off of that, what about those people who are fighting just to be able to come outside of their door? They're walking out of their door on the west side of Chicago now to barricades because they're caged in their own homes. But we don't want to show that on TV, I'm sure. All these militarized vehicles. Also, this one group of people can come together and act like nothing's wrong because they're not hitting on the messages. It looks like a giant party to me.
well,
I
let me
didn't
say
I
this.
didn't know I didn't know if I was in church on Monday or not. But I
Let me
know
tell
Mhm.
there
you
were a lot
something.
of messages that were overlooked.
Dr. Latrice, and I want Robert to jump in here because I only got about 5 or 6 more minutes left. Arlene, you said just because you don't believe it doesn't mean some protesters aren't paid. Look, let me tell you something. Arlene, don't talk to me with that. There was a man who was part of our Black Men Pushing, which was our usher board. He used to drive my father places. He would pick my brothers and I up from school. My sister wasn't born yet. And we found out later on when I was going to college that he was from the Red Squad. Who was the Red Squad? The Red Squad was the division of the police that was sent to kill, and that they did kill Fred Hampton. He was sent to kill my father. He said, every time I had the opportunity, I couldn't do it because I got to know you all, got to know your father, your mother, you kids, and the people at Push. And you were not what I was told. You were not violent. You did not just jump out and march, not rabble rouse. You were out trying to make change. Now, see, I'm older than you now, Anastasia. I used to go to grocery stores where they would bring rotted meat to the Black community.
Oh,
No, 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 no. There were flies in the stores, Anastasia. Flies.
that's disgusting.
Oh, no, 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 honey. Wait, wait, wait. No, no. See, because I don't come from a place of comfort. My parents' first home alone by themselves was a project in Greensboro, North Carolina. Now, did I grow up in that? No, because my parents, it got better and better and better for them. But I'm simply saying to you, for you to say that, you are out of step with the movement when you say that.
I don't think I'm out of step
No,
with the
no,
movement. In fact,
I
when
know
I
that
went
you
to
are.
the
I know
Rainbow
that
Push
you are because
Coalition
no, no,
convention
no,
on
no, no, no,
Sunday,
no, no. I know,
I
I
was
know,
right
I
there
know.
bringing the
No, wait,
movement.
no, wait a minute. No, 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 because you're not as old as I am. I'm 61 years old. I've got some years on you, and I've got some experience on you. I grew up with the Chicago police sitting outside of my home and a Black private police force inside of my home. I grew up. I never had a day where I thought my father would be alive at the end of ever. And so I knew I was trained as a child to spot an agitator. I was trained as a child to spot someone who would confront me in the store. I cannot even
I
tell
mean,
you the
what are we
difference.
training our children today? We're
No,
training
no,
our
no, no,
children to
no, no,
hide
no,
from
no, no.
shooters.
What
When
I'm
I
telling
grew
we're
up,
talking.
they were
We
training us to
cannot
hide
talk at
from
the same
tornadoes.
time. We
I
can't
mean,
talk at
every
the same.
generation has
Stop,
changed,
Anastasi. Don't
but that
talk over
doesn't
me.
make
No,
my
no,
opinion less.
Anastasi. It does not. But don't talk over me, and I won't talk over you. Let's not do that. You're not going to outshout me on this because we have different experiences. I'm simply trying to share with you the movement experience. That's what I'm trying to do with you, for you. And I'm here to tell you, Dr. King did not lead people into violence. He did not do that. Reverend Jackson didn't do that. That is not what we do. You have some paid agitators, absolutely, and you need to find out where their paychecks are coming from. Ask Jerry Seinfeld's wife and Bill Ackman why they were paying the people to break up the encampments, the peaceful encampments at UCLA. Ask them. They were paying them to beat those students. Have you talked to? Why don't you talk about them? Because
I
they sure
wanted to
did
talk
do it.
about the lack of
No, no, no.
violence at the Chicago Police Department, and I wanted to commend him.
What I'm saying to you is, if you want to talk about paid agitators, I just brought up to you an example of people who've paid the agitators, and you have had no response from me. Just wait right there, Attorney Robert Patillo. And we can agree to disagree, but what we're not going to do is override an experience that I've had. I'm trying to share with you movement experience which most people have not had. Dr. King's marches were very small. Reverend Jackson's marches have historically been small because everybody who says that they march with them are not telling the truth. These men and women in real time have been very unpopular. We have never been supported by the Black elites, the so-called boule. Not Reverend Jackson, not Dr. King. No. And we have had to fight the police. Even as Black police officers and sympathetic police officers, Anastasia would come to us and say, hey, these people are trying to jam you. So we would have police officers who would come to our side and come to our aid because they knew what the game was. Robert Patillo?
Absolutely. And I think it's an important conversation for us to have as a community, because on the one hand, to Anastasia's point, when you look at the danger on the other side, and I think we can't lose sight of that. When we're talking about the mass deportation of 10 million people starting January the 21st of 2025 at 12 noon, as Donald Trump has promised, when we're talking about the deportation of anyone who was pro-Hamas or pro-Palestinian, when you're talking about having an intellectual test to come into America and saying that if you have any anti-Israel ideology, you won't be allowed entry into the United States of America. These are things that they have written down as part of their platform. on the other side of the aisle. In addition to, as you said, Santita, the wholesale destruction of affirmative action, the wholesale destruction of diversity programs. We're seeing corporation after corporation that came out after George Floyd and said that they will be standing up for diversity, equity, and inclusion, quietly cutting those programs out almost on a daily, if not weekly basis. When it comes, and that's going to impact the Black community severely because we've allowed other people to change the conversation around segregation, desegregation, affirmative action, diversity, etc. So there's conversations that have to take place. But on the other hand, to the doctor's point, we do not have the voices of the street showing up in these high places. That the strength of Donald Trump has always been that he empowers people who are never part of the inside game. As we mentioned earlier with Dr. Gibbs, he's not beholden to the Bushes or the Romneys or the McCains or any of the other great political families of the Republican Party. He's empowered people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert, who would never be paid attention to in American politics, where anybody thinks they can put on a MAGA hat and have the power to change national policy. These people believe, and the reason they pray to him as they do, the reason they lift him up and think God Almighty is watching over his shoulders, because they, for the first time in American politics, have found their champion, someone who they believe will stand up to them. Do the policies actually support that? No, of course not. But this is what they believe. I think Democrats will do well to find a way to bridge that gap, to listen to the people who are not part of the powerful, who are not part of the in crowd. I think the Harris campaign has leaned too deeply into these HBCU, Divine Nine, Boule sorts of venues and events to have these conversations, and haven't gotten down into the mud, or as Gen Z say, hasn't pulled it out the trenches as it would be. So we've got about 8 weeks until early voting starts nationwide. We got 11 weeks until Election Day. There has to be a plan put in place, not to go talk at Black people, not to go talk at poor people, but to talk to them and to integrate their conversations and their needs and their desires into the Democratic platform. Because as much as I believe climate change is an existential threat, I know that hunger and poverty in Black communities is threatening us right now. As much as I love these conversations about these kind of intellectual ideas on equality and etc., people are suffering right now, and that conversation isn't being presented. I think there's a way to do both, and as we're seeing on the other side of the aisle, where you have a party where poor white people in trailer parks in rural America are supporting a billionaire who lives in a golden resort and is being supported by other billionaires because they figured out how to bridge that gap, and Democrats should do something very similar. Circling back to Michelle Obama's speech, which I think was kind of the initiating point for the conversation, as somebody who has drug a Black woman into politics, kicking and screaming against her will, being my wife, I can say that Michelle Obama is a true inspiration to an entire generation of Black women. We went on the book tour and paid money to go sit in an arena to listen to Michelle Obama talk about a book she wrote, and the arena was sold out. They sold more tickets to that event at the state or the basketball stadium there in DC than for the Washington Wizards game the night before, because she has that sort of draw on this generation. And when you have a generation which is being so influenced by the Cardi B's, the Meg Thee Stallions, the Sexy Reds, Lotto, Glorilla, etc., Michelle Obama was almost like everybody's auntie or grandma showing back up to reestablish order. We're seeing a renaissance of Black women over 50 right now in American politics and in American life. And this is very much a moment that I think we have to appreciate as it happens, while also pushing forward the progressive agenda that all of us want to see taking place going forward. I believe that we have the ability as a community to do both and, as opposed to either or.
And let's hop over to the second hour and continue the conversation, because I think it's important. Because I have to tell you, as a point of personal privilege, I've known Michelle Obama since Michelle LaVaughn Robinson in 1977. She's been one of the dearest friends that I've had. I cannot tell you how proud I am of her. Do I share a lot of personal anecdotes about her? No, because my personal friendships I don't share. She's talked about me in her books, and she's free to tell her story. I don't do that. I grew up in public life, so I have an aversion to that. That having been said, I'm so proud of her. I cried. I was so proud of her. I'm proud of her, but I want to, as I look at her, I was like one woman winning. I want all of us to win, and I'm going to continue to push to make that happen. I want to continue to push to make that happen. As our young girls look at her and say, "Hey, that could be me." I want you to know the space that you're walking into, and when you get into that space, I want you to fight for us because we have some real needs. Our people are hurting. And maybe by seeing her, they got a glimpse of some hope. And I think that that's important. Absolutely, it is. Now, let's continue to do the work. And, for Karen and others who say that we didn't protest 45, we didn't protest 44 because we got the word from the Obama White House to shut up. Did we not, Robert?
Mm-hmm.
We were told to be quiet. And we said, that's a mistake because that's going to hurt you. Okay? We were told not to protest because if you protest, you're going to hurt him. Dissent is the highest form of patriotism. And when people come into your marches and into your protest space and they are violent and they're disruptive, know that they are chaos agents and remove them. So that's what you need to do. But for the most part, people are too comfortable to come out of their homes and march. That's not what they want to do. So when they do, I absolutely respect that because this is not what they do. But let's find out what you thought about the convention speeches and go from rhetoric to, to the reality of it. What's going to happen here? And so, I just want to know
Santita.
what your thoughts are. I gotta go though, but
Oh,
okay.
okay.
All right, everybody. I love you. Second hour of the Santita Jackson Show starts in a couple of minutes.